So, what is a consensus protocol? In the blockchain world, a consensus protocol prescribes whom to believe when people have different opinions in transaction history. In proof-of-work consensus protocols, the authentic history is defined as the version that is most computationally challenging to produce. Many proof-of-work protocols have been proposed after Bitcoin's Nakamoto consensus. Each claims to achieve stronger security properties than NC. However, the technological progress cannot be measured by the number of protocols. The key question is there a proof-of-work protocol that comprehensively outperforms NC in security? Let's first recall NC. The protocol prescribed to resolve forks, miners mine on the longest chain if there is one, or the first received chain in the type. To issue rewards, the protocol prescribes main chain blocks receive full rewards and orphan blocks receive nothing. The key weakness of the protocol is its imperfect chain quality, which means an attacker with less than 50% of mining power can modify the blockchain with high success rate. Consequently, 3 attacks are made possible. First, selfish mining. In this figure, the double red line indicates the public network, and the red square indicates when a block is broadcast to the network. When the attacker finds a block, instead of publishing it to the network, he secretly withholds it, hoping to gain a larger lead on the public chain. If the next block is found by an honest miner, the attacker broadcasts the block to the public, hoping that the next block will be found after the attacker block. If the attacker is lucky enough to find more than 1 block in a row, he will not broadcast the chain until the lead is reduced to 1. At that time, the attacker broadcasts all the secret blocks. Because the attacker chain is longer, all miners will mine on the attacker chain. In this attack, the attacker gains unfair block rewards unproportional to its mining power share. What is worse, honest miners, rational miners, would be incentivized to join force the attacker because the relative block reward increases superlinearly with the mining power share, which damages decentralization. The second attack is called double spending. The attacker signs a transaction to a merchant and embed it in the public chain, will secretly put a conflicting version of the transaction in its secret chain. When the public chain reaches 6 confirmation, the merchant would deliver the product. At that time, the attacker releases all the secret blocks to invalidate the honest chain. In this attack, the attacker gets the product without paying for it. The third attack is called censorship attack or feather forking attack. The attacker publicly claims to invalidate all the blocks confirming certain transactions. If some miners does not obey the order, the attacker will try to invalidate the miner's block, despite that the attacker may temporarily in a shorter chain. Although the success rate of this attack is slim, the rational choice for other miners is to join the attacker in the censorship attack to avoid losing block rewards. There are other attacks, but they do not target the consensus layer directly. Our evaluation framework consists of 4 metrics. Recall that the imperfect chain quality leads to 3 attacks. So a protocol claims to be more secure than NC needs to be either achieves better chain quality or resist better against all 3 attacks. Selfish mining resistance is measured by incentive compatibility, double spending resistance is measured by subversion gain, and censorship resistance is measured by censorship susceptibility. Please check the paper for the mathematical definitions. Here are the better than NC candidates. We split them into 2 groups. The first group is called better chain quality protocols. These protocols claim that I can raise the chain quality and solve the problem fundamentally. The second group is called attack-resistant protocols. These protocols claim that I do not need to raise the chain quality. I can defend against all the attacks, usually by a novel blockchain topology or a novel reward distribution mechanism. We further split this group into 3 subgroups. reward all protocols distribute rewards to main chain blocks and orphan blocks to remove the incentive for the attacker to perform selfish mining attack. Punishment protocols forfeit rewards from all the blocks, regardless of whether they are in the main chain, hoping that this can discourage attackers from doing selfish mining and double spending attacks. Reward lucky protocols distribute reward according to the block content rather than the block topology, hoping that certain blocks serves as anchor point to stabilize the blockchain. Our method is based on Markov decision process, which is most commonly used in analyzing a strategic player's behavior in a partly stochastic environment. The main idea is to model the protocol execution as a Markov decision process and compute the attacker's optimal strategy and its security metric of interest. The first step is to define the attacker's utility according to the security metric of interest. For example, in selfish mining, the attacker's utility is defined as the percentage of the attacker's reward among all the rewards. The second step is to model the protocol as an MDP. And then we cannot see it. We solve the MDP and compute the attacker's optimal strategies. We compare the utilities with NC and find out whether they are better or worse. And last, we check the respective strategies and find out why. Before we go to the results, a disclaimer. Do not equate the security of a consensus protocol with its cryptocurrencies, as many real-world factors affect the security of the cryptocurrencies. For example, deploying a 51% attack against Ethereum Classic is obviously easier than doing that on Bitcoin. And several systems implement implement external protection for certain attack resistance. So here are the results. As you can see, there is no protocol that comprehensively outperforms Nakamoto consensus in security. They either only raise the chain quality in certain attacker setting or sacrifice one attacker incentive for the other. In the paper, we identify several protocol-specific attack strategies and enumerate a series of insights on why they fail to achieve their goals. For the rest of this presentation, I will introduce two examples and only one insight. The first example is an reward-all protocol called fruit chains. In fruit chains, the same mining procedure will produce two kinds of different product. It is a block if the first k bits of the mining of its hash is lower than a certain threshold. It is a fruit if the last k bits of the product hash is below than another threshold. And fruits are embedded in blocks, and transactions are embedded in fruits. The fork resolving policy follows longest chain and first receive, same as Nakamoto consensus. And each fruit has a pointer block, which the fruit miner is sure will not be orphaned. A fruit is valid if the pointer block is in the main chain, and the gap is below a certain threshold. The gap is defined as the height difference between a fruit's host block and its pointer block. In this example, the pointer block of tomato is orphaned, so tomato can never be an honest fruit. And because the pair is not embedded in the blockchain soon enough after it is mined, it can never be a valid fruit because its gap is too large. The reward distribution policy is that valid fruits receive full rewards and blocks receive nothing. Here are fruit chain's results. It is actually worse than Nakamoto consensus in incentive compatibility and subversion game because risk-free units encourage audacious behavior. What do I mean by risk-free units? In fruit chains, attackers' blocks are risk-free units because they don't get any reward anyway. So for the attacker, why not withholding them? And the attacker's first several fruits are also risk-free units because they can be embedded in both chains. So their rewards are secured. So for the attacker, why not try to double spend or doing selfish mining? Fruit chain censorship susceptibility is better than that of Nakamoto consensus, because fruits in invalidated blocks can be added back later in the blockchain. In this figure, the orange is orphaned by several attacker blocks, but it is later embedded in another block, so the orange miner still gets some fruit rewards. The second example is a punishment protocol called reward splitting protocol. It allows blocks to refer to previously orphaned blocks as uncles. An uncle is valid if the gap is below a certain threshold. The gap is defined as the height difference between the uncle's host block and the uncle itself. Note that this definition is different from the gap definition of fruit chains. In reward splitting protocol, there is no pointer block. We don't care about kin relationship. And each block reward is split evenly among all the blocks of the same height. The incentive compatibility and subversion gain of reward splitting protocol is better than Nakamoto consensus, because punishment is always the most effective way to incentivize correct behavior. In fact, 3 confirmation reward splitting protocol performs better than 9 confirmation fruit chains. We also compute the subversion bounty of different protocol, which is defined as the minimum double spending reward to incentivize double spending behavior. When the attacker controls 10% of the mining power and each transaction requires 6 block confirmation, the subversion bounty in Nakamoto consensus is 102 block reward. It is 346 in reward splitting protocol, but 0 in fruit chains. So in fruit chains, it's always free. The censorship susceptibility of reward splitting is quite interesting. For weak attacker, it is actually easier for the attacker to perform censorship attack, because an attacker block mined after the honest block can still split some block rewards from the honest miners. So reward splitting actually introduced a new tool for the attacker to forfeit rewards from honest miners. But for strong attackers, sometimes it is actually stronger than Nakamoto consensus, because in Nakamoto consensus, if you orphan a certain blocks, then all the block rewards are forfeited. But in reward splitting protocol, when you orphan the blocks, they may still split some rewards from you. When chain quality is not perfect, we have a dilemma. If you reward all the blocks, then there's no risk to double spend. If you punish all suspicious blocks, you actually introduce a new tool for the attacker to perform censorship attack. If you only reward lucky protocols because if you only reward lucky blocks because lucky doesn't equal to good, it actually leaves larger room for malicious manipulation. In sum, we need to go beyond reward distribution policy to solve all the attacks. So, what do we learn? Simplicity is beauty. There is no protocol that comprehensively outperforms Nakamoto consensus. And there are several things not to do when designing consensus protocols. The first is to design a protocol too complicated to analyze. There are several protocols that have no security analysis, and their vulnerabilities are only revealed by our analysis. The second is to analyze your security against one attacker strategy, because your new protocol often inspires the attacker to create new attack strategy to attack your protocol. The third thing is to analyze your security against one attacker incentive. Optimizing your protocol against one attacker incentive often makes it more vulnerable to other attacker incentive. The last is to use unrealistic parameters. So how to achieve better chain quality and attack resistance? We suggest you use more practical assumptions, like awareness of network conditions, loosely synchronized clocks, or real-world commitment, or outsource liability to raise attack resistance. For example, introduce additional punishment rules, or solve the attack at layer 2. To conclude, whenever someone tells you he has a perfectly secure consensus protocol, you can tell him academia is watching you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have time for questions. Yes.
Hi, Ren. Thanks for the great talk. So a kind of practical question. You said at the end about people are coming up with all of these protocols and they're not being measured against existing standards. How, this is kind of like a more meta issue, but how, do you have thoughts on how we process through all of the different protocols that people come up with? And as a community, we sort through protocols to distinguish the really bad stuff from the stuff that might be okay.
Sorry, I didn't quite get the question.
People come up with a lot of protocols. How do we, there are just so many blockchain protocols in the space at present. How do we, as a community, separate the good protocols from the bad ones?
Just listen to the academia.
But in terms of academia, how do we, there's just so many protocols coming, how do we...
We just evaluate them one by one.
Okay.
There's no better way to do it, I think.
Okay.
Further questions?
Cristina Nițărotaru, Northeastern University. I like very much to see your conclusion about paying attention to network assumptions. Can you give us some examples?
Some examples on how to raise attack resistance.
Yes, it seemed like the assumptions that these blockchains are making about network conditions
are very weak.
Yeah.
Maybe we can strengthen them using miners' local information. For example, if I'm a miner, when I receive two conflicting blocks at the same time, I would rather prefer the block whose timestamp is closer to mine in terms of fork resolving policy. Maybe this kind of behavior can give us better chain quality guarantee.
Thank you.
Maybe one more question. No question. Okay, then let's think. Oh, there's one.
So you measured these protocols against 3 separate attacks, and what's coming to my mind is how, well, I mean, obviously these are attacks that exist in the wild or have been analyzed before, but how, do you know if there may be further attacks that you may have to analyze these protocols against, and especially if they change the core consensus, maybe more attacks become feasible against them?
That is possible. So this is not a complete list. This is just the current attacks we are aware of.
Okay, thank you.
So, thank you very much.